Hi, my name is Joost Wouters. I'm one of the founders of the Seaweed Company and one of the project engineers that have contributed to the United pilot project. Um, about 3 years ago, we started with a very interesting pilot. We wanted to demonstrate how we can create an infrastructure to cultivate seaweed in offshore conditions. This was quite new territory. There have been some first preliminary tests and demonstrations done before, but this time we wanted to show that it is possible and that we can prove that in a full-scale operation. The importance of seaweed is quite interesting. Seaweed is I would say, a very untapped resource. It has many benefits for humans, animals, crops, and soils. And the beauty is, if it's growing, it doesn't require land or fresh water or fertilizers to grow. Now, seaweed has therefore a lot of potential, and at the same time, we do need locations where we can grow seaweed. And that is where offshore cultivation can play a role. If you look at the seas that are available right now, and if you would go near shore, those are most often very crowded areas with a lot of traffic already, especially in the Netherlands and Belgium. That's why seaweed cultivation in, let's say, wind farms could be a very interesting solution. So a kind of a multi-use approach where you have the wind parks and in between you do other agricultural activities. So that was the starting point for the United project. And that is what we would like, that we wanted to demonstrate. Now, we have learned a lot, and I have some small images to take you through, and to show you how the process went in a nutshell. And most importantly is, if you have any questions, if things pop up, then don't hesitate to contact us. But let's see how we started. In the end, we have deployed a system that we worked on for quite some time. We have built an infrastructure that could withstand heavy conditions. We were out 7 miles off the coast, so about 12 kilometers off the coast, with about 20 meters water depth. And we had to build a structure that was robust enough to withstand those conditions, but also flexible enough to go with the waves and the currents. We could not build a rig, like an oil rig, for instance. So we came up with an idea to build spar buoys, long 11, 12 meter long buoys that are anchored and moored to the seabed. And in between, we position the nets on which we will grow our seaweed. Now, to build this structure in the North Sea, we had to overcome some challenges. So first of all, we needed to anchor the infrastructure. And in the project, just to make sure that this is still a relatively small project, so we had to be pragmatic and flexible with anchoring what we could find. So we had to test a couple of things. What kind of anchors will fit the seabed, which we started with different anchors, and then we found out that the local bedding was not enough. So we needed to come up with these type of anchors that you see here. And so the anchors were the first thing. So they're quite oversized. These anchors weigh about 6.5 tons, which you don't need, but we could find them, and also in the time that we needed them. So that was step number one: how to anchor them. And here you see we felt Michiel Mol, my colleague, our offshore engineer, myself. If you see us sitting on those anchors, we felt pretty cool. Then the second step was to connect to the anchors the so-called spar buoys. So we have designed and developed these spar buoys, as I said, 11 meters long, and they had to be taken on a ship, on a vessel, and then towards the offshore location, where they were offloaded and put into position so we could have them. So we had now the anchors in position and the spar buoys, and in between we built some connecting lines on which we would later in the process install the nets with the seeded seaweed on it. Here you see an example of the freshly seeded nets that we have put in between the spar buoys. So here you can get an idea about the total infrastructure. So the nets are still very wide and virgin. That would change immediately. So one of the lessons is that fouling is a big thing. Everything that's in the water will catch organisms. Now, the installation of the anchors and the installation of the spar buoys and the installation of the nets required all the time different vessels. And that's also a lesson that right now we had to look for vessels that were available and could do the job. Of course, if you scale up in a larger project, you could at one point create the optimal vessels. But we have tested with different vessels. This specific vessel really fitted the job. It could do a lot of things. It had a crane that was strong enough to lift spar buoys, to lift the nets. So we have used this vessel quite a lot. Now, funnily enough, every time we sailed out, some strange things happened. So and we see that as good fortune. So one day a fish literally jumped on board, and I caught it. So that was good fortune for me. Another day, a bird decided to sit on Michiel's head, which also we thought like this is good. So the gods of the sea were with us. Now, the whole United project, and that's of course always the case, is about learning, and just do it. That means that not always everything goes well. So after year one, we had tested with several types of nets, and one of the tests where we made a net out of different ropes. It was not just strong enough for the currents, and this is the result then. And actually, that's also one of the lessons. This is what we hoped for in a way. So if everything would go very smoothly, we would not have learned anything. So we have learned a ton of things during this project. And also, if you look at the first year, harvest was extremely small. So here you see some blades. But this is also in the United project. What we have seen is that you need to go on, continue, and learn. So the second year we improved a lot. We implemented all the learnings, and that resulted in a complete different harvest. So here you see in year 2. Nets that are full of seaweed that we have taken on board and that we have harvested later on. So this small short presentation, I think it gives a kind of an idea about what we have done. So if I take this as the background, then. So after 3 years, we can conclude that we have demonstrated successfully the use of an infrastructure to cultivate seaweed. At the same time, as I said, we have learned a lot. We went through the business model, the fuel consumption, the vessels that we need. So if we start imagining an upscale scenario, then there is definitely a lot of bottlenecks to tackle. One of them is what we've learned is we have to deal with weather windows. even if you have everything prepared, you have your seeded nets and you have your vessels ready and you have your anchors ready, then still you are depending on the right weather. And what we found out is that the maximum working environment was about 1.5 meter wave height. That was the max. Ideally, it was lower. But if you look at then your local conditions in offshore, then you see that there are not a lot of days where you have 1.5 meter or less. So that is one thing. The second is the distance. So we were now in a test environment, 12 kilometers or 7 miles off the coast. However, if you look at wind farms, the closest one is about 32 kilometers offshore. That means about 4 hours sailing and 4 hours back. That's already 8 hours on board. That leaves you very limited time window to work in. So how to deal with that? Overnight shifts that require then a lot of additional cost and investment. So that is something to think about. So if you combine the distance plus the weather windows, that's one interesting thing to look into. Then the second thing is the robustness and the maintenance of the structure. Our system has survived a lot of storms. We have designed it for once in a 50-year storm, and we have had 4 of them in 2 years, thanks to different changes in climate, I think. So again, building a structure that is strong enough and robust enough, but still flexible enough so it can go with the waves and the currents. There are still some engineering things to be worked out, especially if you work in a wind park environment that requires extremely amount of safety. If you talk about those turbines. But having said that, then a scenario over time is definitely possible where you position several seaweed farms or systems within an area of a wind park. Now, you don't need all space. You can perfectly select areas where you take care of the safety zones around turbines and also the sailing routes for vessels. And then there's enough space to start to build several infrastructures. Now, to prepare our team and to prepare for this, we had done, of course, all the safety trainings that we needed from a personal and security perspective. Now, if you start scaling up in wind parks, there are a lot of different certificates and things that you need with these initiatives. You need to comply with everything that also the regular oil and gas industry offshore, but also the wind industry needs to comply with. You are working in open water, and that is extremely, extremely dangerous and potentially dangerous. So we were very aware of that. All the crew that worked on this project has followed survival training. We always made sure that that we followed the right procedures when we went offshore with enough mobile connectivity, etc. So those are several of the trainings that you need to think about. Now, the key tech challenges and the lessons learned during the project, to summarize this, I think I explained quite a lot of them. It is apart from capital that you would need, and there are quite some other things that we would need. So first of all, it is the cooperation with wind parks. You need to come with you're joining, you're using the area with different players there. The second thing to the tech challenge is the robustness, so the compliance with what is built within wind parks. The third one is definitely the vessels, the fuel consumption of the vessels. You don't want to consume too much fuel per kilogram of seaweed, because that would completely erode the business case or at least the ecological business case. Talking about a business case, that is not really a tech issue, but definitely something to tackle. Right now, the seaweed that you can grow is as a way to high cost, but that can come down over time. And Yeah, that is in a nutshell our project and our learnings. Um, I think this is extremely relevant for let's say organizations that see the need for seaweed as a resource to sustainalize their value chain. For instance, the food value chain, where seaweed can play a role in agriculture, when you make biostimulants out of it. So to grow seaweed, so we have enough seaweed to actually, yeah, use and make fully benefit from these applications. We do need a lot of seaweed, therefore we do probably need to look further offshore. Um, and yeah, so I think there's an exciting future ahead of us. Thanks to the learnings and the demonstration we could do, we have actually shifted from theoretical knowledge to hands-on experience. We know what works, we know a lot what doesn't work. And I think that this is the way forward, where yeah, projects like these will build on each other's knowledge, and therefore we can grow to a very healthy and sustainable seaweed cultivation offshore in the future. Again, any questions, you can always reach us at the Seaweed Company. We're more than happy to discuss challenges and new projects. And I hope this was it gave some background about our project. Thanks a lot.